Stephanie Bryan, 14 years old, was last seen on April 28, 1955 on the way home from school taking her usual shortcut through the parking lot of the Claremont Hotel. The police were alerted and a large-scale search was carried out, but nothing was found except a school textbook which was found in a field. On July 15, 1955, the police received a phone call from Mrs. Georgia Abbott to say that she had been in her basement looking for something when she had found some personal items belonging to Stephanie Bryan, including purse and an ID card, in the basement of the home she shared with her husband, Burton Abbott, and his mother, Elsie Abbott. In interviewing the Abbotts, the police found that Elsie Abbott had found the purse earlier but did not connect it with the case. The police went to the house and conducted a search which revealed some school books and a pair of glasses and a brassiere. No other traces could be found in the house. Police subsequently dug up Stephanie's glasses, a brassiere, and other evidence. No one in the family could account for how the victim's personal effects came to be in the basement. Burton Abbott stated he was driving to the family's cabin 300 miles away when Stephanie disappeared. The Abbotts did have a weekend cabin about 300 miles away in the Trinity Mountains. The police decided to search that. In a shallow grave close to the cabin they found the badly decomposed body of Stephanie Bryan. She had been bludgeoned to death. Burton Abbott was a 27-year-old student at the University of California in Berkeley. He was put on trial in Oakland where the prosecution established he was a sexual deviant. The jury took 7 days to return a verdict of guilty. He was executed for kidnapping and murdering the 14-year-old schoolgirl. The main evidence which helped to convict him were hairs and fibers found on Abbott's car that matched those from the girl's head and clothing. Burton Abbott was arrested and charged with kidnapping and murdering Stephanie Bryan. Although the evidence against him was entirely circumstantial, he was convicted and sentenced to death in California's gas chamber. The outcome of this case raised questions whether the state has the right to execute a person based on circumstantial evidence alone. He was executed in March of 1957. As he was being executed, a stay of execution was telephoned to the prison. The trial was one of the mostly highly publicized in California history. The prosecution hypothesis was that Abbott had attempted to rape the victim and killed her when she resisted. Abbott pled not guilty. At the trial, all the evidence produced was circumstantial and nothing directly connected Abbott with Stephanie Bryan's death. The prosecution used emotion to overcome the lack of direct evidence by such strategies as showing the jury the rotten clothes from the victim's body, making implications he could not prove. Abbott explained that in May the basement of the house had been used as a polling site with many people having access. Although the prosecution charged attempted rape, the pathologist testified that the body was too decomposed to evaluate it for evidence of sexual assault. Abbott took the stand and testified for 4 days, testifying in a calm and poised manner. He spoke in a soft voice and was steadfast in his denials of any knowledge of the crime. He said it was all a monstrous frame-up. The jury was out 7 days before it returned a verdict of guilty of first-degree murder. The judge imposed the death sentence. As provided by California law, there was an automatic appeal to the Supreme Court of California. In detailed opinion describing the facts of the case and reciting the evidence that had been presented at trial, the court affirmed the conviction and sentence of death. Abbott was incarcerated at San Quentin to await execution. His lawyers worked to commute his sentence for over a year. On March 15, 1957, the day of the execution, which was scheduled for 11 p.m., his attorney appealed to the United States Court of Appeals, which was denied, and then tried to contact the Governor of California, Goodwin J. Knight, but the governor was at sea on a naval ship and out of reach of the telephone. The attorney arranged with a TV station to broadcast a plea to the governor. At 11:12 a.m. Governor Knight was reached again and agreed to another stay. At 11:15 a.m. Abbott was led to the gas chamber and strapped in the chair while the governor was contacting the warden by telephone. The executioner pulled the lever 3 minutes later and 16 pellets of sodium cyanide dropped into the sulfuric acid as Governor Knight reached the prison warden to stay the execution. The warden told him it was too late, and Abbott died at the age of 29 as the governor hung up the telephone. Even his last moments took an amazing turn. There was complete silence in the gas chamber, wrote the Chronicle's George Draper, who was an eyewitness. The silence was broken by the mechanical clank of the device that drops the fatal pellets. Abbott took a deep breath before the pellets dropped and held it as long as he could. The next breath he took killed him. Burton W. Abbott, a slight man whose last occupation was a student of accounting at UC Berkeley, was 29. The call that would have saved his life was 2 minutes too late. Mrs. Elsie Abbott was 100 and died at her home on the East Coast. To her dying day, and despite the evidence to the contrary, Elsie Abbott believed her son was murdered by the state of California when he was executed in San Quentin's gas chamber 47 years ago. She thought his execution was legalized murder. For one thing, she believed that the slightly built Abbott, who had tuberculosis and had only half a lung, wasn't strong enough to carry Stephanie's body, much less dig a grave. For another, he had an alibi for his whereabouts the day Stephanie vanished. He had a wife and a child. "We believe in him," Elsie said of Abbott's family, "because we know him. They called him Bud. None of this is real. I can't believe this is happening to me, to my son," she said on the day his trial began. "He is innocent," she shouted outside the courtroom on the day he was convicted. "We are never going to stop until we prove that Burton was innocent," she said on the day he died. It was the beginning of one of the most famous criminal cases in Northern California history, dominating page 1 nearly every day for 2 years. Elsie Abbott was at the center of it, a loyal and devoted mother convinced that her son could not possibly be guilty of kidnap and murder. She believed all her life that the real killer was still at large, even theorizing that her own brother had set up her son. Through it all, and for the rest of her life, Elsie Abbott was convinced her son was innocent. She thought his execution was legalized murder. She was absolutely, completely 1000% convinced he didn't do it. After Abbott's death, his wife, Georgia, moved out of California and told neighbors in Alameda that she would change her name. She took the couple's 4-year-old son, Chris, with her. He was not told what happened to his father until years later, when he was a grown man. Before Abbott died, Elsie bought a newspaper ad offering a reward for evidence of Burton Abbott's innocence. After he died, she gathered up what she said was new evidence that proved Abbott could not have killed Stephanie. She had witnesses, she said, witnesses whose testimony was blocked by the prosecution at the trial. She couldn't sleep nights, she was trying to clear his name. She presented her evidence years later to the Alameda County Grand Jury. The jury would not consider it. Elsie Abbott even had a theory about the real murderer. She was sure it was her own brother, Wilbur Moore, a truck driver who lived in San Leandro. He had set Burton up, Elsie thought, and planted clues that led to an innocent man.